In thinking about the account of the Transfiguration, I found myself reflecting on a couple of things. The first is Peter's odd words to Jesus as he tries to make sense of this experience of seeing Jesus and Moses and Elijah on the mountaintop. And he says, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." What on earth is that about? What is he thinking? Now, it's probably fair to say that Peter was somewhat freaked out by what was happening there. There was nothing in his experience that would have prepared him for this. So, perhaps motivated by a sense that this was a really special event, the only thing he can think to do is to memorialize it, preserve it somehow. 3 dwellings, 3 monuments, 3 dwellings to mark the occasion, and I'll erect them immediately. A pretty understandable reaction, I guess. Peter wants to hang on to this extraordinary, this supernatural occasion. Maybe he even thinks that he'll come back here someday and relive the experience, or that others will. See, it was right here. Right here, see those dwellings? This is where it happened. The second thing that came to my mind was my memory of a trip to the Holy Land, which a bunch of us from the cathedral took back in 2015. One of our stops was what was purported to be the hill on which the Transfiguration took place. I didn't know what to expect. Perhaps a broad expanse of hillside, where one could imagine standing there with Jesus, but no. Instead, we came to the Church of the Transfiguration, a beautiful church set among trees and gardens and other buildings and watched over by a very bossy nun. It was very impressive. And my thought was, Peter got his way after all. That holy, revelatory, cosmic event had been, well, memorialized. Forget 3 dwellings. Here was a shrine. And I found it difficult to connect all that with what had happened here, actually. Now, I don't imagine that everyone else in the group felt the same way. It may well be that I was missing what was there, and that I was just unable to take the place for what it was. Maybe I was just like Peter, only in reverse. Peter really couldn't take it in and wanted to build dwellings. I couldn't take this in, and I wanted the dwellings removed. Or maybe I'm just more of a curmudgeon than I like to admit. So what was I hoping for? I think the closest I can come for myself is what happens for me when I am in the mountains. I love the mountains. I love the splendor of them even when I see them from far off. But I am especially moved to be up in them, looking around me. I have a sense of the wonder of creation that is truly moving. In those times, I feel closest to God. I suppose I was hoping for a mountaintop experience. Now, the real meaning of mountaintop experiences for those of us gathered here really lies in their scriptural roots. If we look at the story of Moses going up on Mount Sinai, or the Transfiguration of Jesus, then we see that what gives the mountaintop experience its power is that it involves an encounter with God, a close, personal encounter which is so intense that it transforms the individual. In another place, we are told that Moses' face shone whenever he talked to God. And Jesus is also transformed before the disciples' eyes. And the implication, I think, is that no one meets God without being changed by that experience. And so it is with our own mountaintop experiences. Any one of them involve an encounter with God, and in that encounter, we know ourselves to be changed. Now, we may not come out of them thinking that God has somehow spoken to us directly, but I would say that if the experience has shown us light, if it has shown us truth, if it has somehow made our path clear, if it has helped us understand ourselves and others better, then I think it was truly an encounter with God. For truth, light, and understanding are of God and can only come from God. However, there is something common to all these experiences. No matter what, after they are over, life goes on. You have the mountaintop experience of meeting the one that you love, and you get married. You wed the person of your dreams. But then begins the real work of marriage. You pursue your calling. Along the way, you still face roadblocks, pitfalls, and all the normal vicissitudes of getting from here to there. You understand life more profoundly, but you still have to live your life day to day. That doesn't change. Now, most of us know this in the abstract. We affirm it as an objective truth, I think. Yet nonetheless, we must often learn and relearn the truth of this through the rough road of experience. So with this in mind, we return to the Transfiguration. This event certainly ranks as one of those truly cosmic moments when something awesome is revealed with great and unmistakable clarity. Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up on a high mountain. There they see him transfigured, changed so that his face shines like the sun and his clothes appear to be dazzling white. Then the disciples see Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus. Peter gets so excited by this, he knows a cosmic moment when he sees one, that he wants to build those 3 memorials on the spot to mark what has happened. Then a cloud passes over them, and they hear the voice of God saying, "This is my Son, my beloved, on whom my favor rests. Listen to him." This completely overwhelms the disciples, and they fall on their faces in terror. But then Jesus calls out to them that they should not be afraid. And when they look up, he is alone. The moment is over. What an incredible experience. For Jesus, it is certainly an apotheosis, a moment in his earthly ministry when his divinity is unmistakably revealed. For the disciples, it is also an important moment. They've been following Jesus, and Lord knows it has not been easy at times. There have been moments of struggle, moments of doubt, and even though they have seen wonderful signs, they have often shrunk from facing the truth. And then they get to see. They see Jesus transfigured, revealed to them in a different way. They see Moses and Elijah, mighty prophets whose own ministry foreshadowed Jesus in some important ways, and they hear the voice of God proclaiming Jesus to be his Son. For them, in that moment, all is clear. Jesus is all they had dared to hope for. Jesus is the Messiah. Jesus is the Son of God. And it had been revealed to them. Literally and figuratively, they have had a mountaintop experience. But, as in all such experiences, once they've been to the top, they have to come down and continue on their way. This is the last Sunday in Epiphany. This story is always the gospel lesson for this day. This coming Wednesday, in case you didn't know it, is Ash Wednesday. And the connection between these two is fitting. For having had this vision ourselves, we will now be moved into the dark season of Lent. And as we move from Transfiguration to Lent, we are reminded that Jesus and his disciples also moved from that Transfiguration into the last phase of his ministry, which was to take him to Jerusalem and the cross. As we contemplate that movement, it's important to note that this holy experience, the physical transformation, the appearance of the prophets, the voice of God, was not to save him from what was to come. And the disciples, whatever they might have hoped for or expected, were soon to find that the road ahead was to be more difficult than the road they had already traveled. One wouldn't blame them, really, for expecting otherwise. After such an exhilarating experience, they might be forgiven if they thought that all was going to be glory from now on. Nothing could stop Jesus. Nothing could stop God's Son. So their faith had been strengthened, but their awareness was as yet a bit incomplete. So we gather here as people of faith. Our faith unites us in a trust in God's love and the hope of the resurrection. Our faith also calls us to be and act as God's people, loving our neighbor, caring for those in need, respecting everyone, honoring that everyone is made in the image of God, just as we are. And sometimes our faith calls us to witness to what we proclaim to be true, to be the people of God as God has been revealed to us. But there's something more, for me at least. In preaching about the Transfiguration in the past, I usually make the point that what followed for Jesus was not glory but the road to Jerusalem, like I just did, where he would be arrested, tortured, tried, and crucified, all in the name of completing the work God had given him to do, all of which is true. But I think I may have been guilty of being perhaps a bit too glib about all this. Without meaning to, I may have laid it out like a drama in which we know the outcome. Hey, I might be saying, don't forget what comes next, as if you need reminding, as if we have not lived through that drama year after year, trying to make as much sense of it as we can. But it's familiar, and perhaps too familiar. What is the true power in this story? I've been wrestling with the statement put out by most of the bishops of the Episcopal Church, including Bishop White. In many ways, it is a powerful statement, condemning the actions of ICE, calling us to be active witnesses for the truth of God's love. There's nothing in it I would disagree with, and in fact, much I would heartily applaud. But when I finished reading it, I have to tell you, I felt somewhat let down. It felt predictable. Like, yes, I've heard these words before. I've seen these words before. So I was struck by the words of Robert Hirschfeld, Bishop of New Hampshire, as he addressed his diocese. And he said, I'm also coming to an awareness that the times of statements and the times of our eloquent words have reached a kind of limit, sadly. As someone who is a man, he goes on, as someone who is a man of profound historical privilege, as one who has made statements that, I have to say, have been really good and eloquent, but have not moved the needle one bit. His subsequent call to action was beyond bold. I think it was chilling. As Dean Thompson mentioned last week, he said, I have told the clergy of the Episcopal Diocese of New Hampshire that we may be entering into that same witness as martyrs in the past. And I've asked them to get their affairs in order, to make sure they have their wills written, because it may be that now is no longer the time for statements, but for us with our bodies to stand between the powers of this world and the most vulnerable. I don't know about you, but that scares me to death. Even writing those words down and anticipating speaking them to you filled me with anxiety. Who am I to preach to you about this when I'm not sure that I'm ready to put my body between the powers of this world and the most vulnerable? But it's something for each of us to ponder as we consider what it means to be a servant of Christ in these perilous times. But on this day of Transfiguration, we can, and I think should, ponder this. When Jesus was transfigured, a cloud appeared, and from it came the voice of God. This is my Son, the beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him. Listen to him. And so God speaks to each of us. Listen to him.